begin the webinar. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Navigating the Regulatory Waters with EU MRV, EU ETS, FuelEU Maritime, and EUA Procurement. I'm Tomujit, and I'm thrilled to be your host for today's session. I'm also joined by my amazing and equally enthusiastic co-moderator, Deepthi, who will help facilitate our discussion. So today we are actually diving into an increasingly important and pressing topic in the maritime industry, the EU emissions trading system, or as we know it as EU ETS, and how it impacts our sector. Now we'll be exploring all the challenges, but more importantly, the opportunities it presents, as well as how we can actually navigate this evolving regulatory landscape. Now, we are joined by two amazing experts who will be sharing their valuable insights. So, let's get started and dive right in. So, now, before we actually jump into our discussion, I would like to go over a quick few points for everyone attending. The webinar will actually be run for approximately 1 hour, and we've allocated the last 15 minutes for the Q&A session with our panelists. Just a quick reminder that this webinar is being recorded. After the session, we will send you a link to the recording as well as any materials shared during the presentation. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation via the Zoom control panel. We encourage you to submit your questions as they arise, and our panelists will address them during the Q&A at the end of the session. So now that the logistics are out of the way, let's move on to the exciting part where I am actually very excited to introduce you to our panelists. So firstly, I would like you introduce Mr. Sanjeev from Varuna Marine Services. He's the managing director of Varuna Marine Services, where he drives the company's strategic direction, growth, and performance. With over 15 years of experience in the maritime industry, he began his career as a marine engineering officer, spending 6 years at sea. Prior to his current role, Mr. Sanjeev held key shore-based positions with major ship owners, focusing on technical and operational aspects. He's passionate about using information technology to enhance maritime workflows, focusing on sustainability and cybersecurity. His work at Varuna Marine Services BV emphasizes maritime emissions, compliance, and regulatory support, helping clients navigate complex standards like EU MRV and Fuel EU. He holds a BTech in Marine Engineering and an MBA in Maritime Management from the University of Greenwich. Mr. Sanjeev's hands-on experience with maritime operations and his strategic approach to emissions reductions will give us a practical view of how companies can actually align with EU ETS requirements while maintaining operational efficiency. I will now actually introduce Mr. Dominic, our second panelist. Mr. Dominic is a seasoned leader with over 20 years of experience in connecting the shipping industry with software and modern technologies. He spent a decade at DNVGL, where he led digital transformation initiatives delivering fleet performance management solutions to global customers, helping reduce fuel consumption, cut emissions, and lower operational costs. In 2019, Dominic joined Wärtsilä Voyage as APAC Director, Sales for Fleet Operation Solutions, driving data-enabled applications in smart maritime ecosystems. He was promoted to Global Head of Solution Advisory in 2021, leading a team to deliver digital projects focused on fuel optimization, and currently he's serving as the Head of APAC at DNV. Dominic is dedicated to promoting Veracity, an independent cloud platform that supports partners in the digitalization and decarbonization efforts through data sharing. So now that we know about them, we are very excited to actually hear from each one of them. So without further ado, let's jump into our discussion. But before that, I would actually move ahead, and here is a quick poll question for you all. And the voting is actually open for 10-15 seconds, prior to which actually after that I will be introducing my co-moderator Deepthi, who will be taking over the presentation and will be guiding you guys forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomajit. A warm welcome once again to everyone. Let's begin with our first speaker, Mr. Sanjeev Viverkani Singh, Managing Director of Varuna Marine Services, brings invaluable hands-on experience and a strategic perspective on emission reduction, making him a key voice for today's discussion. Mr. Sanjeev, over to you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the warm introduction. Can you confirm all of you can hear me? Wonderful. Thank you. Nice to be here. And thank you for everyone who is joining in. So, first of all, I know UETS has been talked throughout the year. So, what I'm trying to do is to just do a wrap up kind of before the festive season kicks in, give you what to take away from this year, what we have seen so far coming out of EMSA, EU in general, um, on the UETS, how it has matured, and what FuelEU Maritime holds for us. While talking about the intersection and how we think this can be managed and some of the pathways that we see in this regime. Just a recap. So it all started with obviously Fit for 55, and the goal here is reduction of GHG intensity, right? So GHG reduction is a key metrics that you had set the target for, and so multiple regimes, multiple packages are working together to achieve this target that is set for 2030. You have for the shipping, what is most important is obviously UETS, which kicked in 1st January 2024, whereby all vessels above 5,000 GRT had to start reporting their emissions under the emission system, which would further be converted into credit system. Now you have, together with that, FuelEU Maritime is a new regime that is coming in 1st of January 2025. It will work in line. It has its own compliance mechanism, and it works with the GHG cap. And with that, we have also the CBAM and the Red Fuel directives, and which all are complementing each other in the path to the reduction of this GHG intensity. But it has its own, let's say, fine writings that we need to understand how it impacts the cross impact of all this legislation on ship operations, running costs, compliance cost, and the business model itself. So at the very basic, ETS is one ton of CO2, which is again converted by multiplying the conversion factor, the CF, with the quantity of the fuel. Once you have that ton CO2, you equate it to one allowance, and basically that is what is being traded on the EU common market system, the carbon market system. We are new to the party. We are just 1 year into the regime. Airlines and power plants within the EU jurisdiction, we're already a part of that. So it's quite a mature market where these carbons are traded. So shipping is just trying to find its own foothold, and it will have a share of that market as well in order to procure those same allowances when we have to surrender it in September next year. So yeah, that's the timeline from what we have saw. So we were reporting CO2 earlier as well under the 30 MRV. It is a well-known system. Obviously, there was no financial implication of those reports, which changed at the onset of this year, whereby the 40% of the emissions will have to be surrendered in terms of carbon credit when the verification ends in March, April next year, and then the deadline is September 2025. So that is the first time when shipping will start surrendering allowances. This year, we also started monitoring CH4 and N2O within the same regime. And from next year, it will start counting towards that as well. And because of the phased in implementation of EU ETS, you have 40% this year, and next year we are going up already to 70%, and it will finally go up to 100% in 2026. So it's quite a steep rise. This year, another change in EU ETS is obviously bringing in the vessels, offshore vessels less than 5,000 GRT, from 400 to 5,000 GRT under the UMRV regime. So that is a new change which these vessels also start reporting. They are not under UETS yet, but that would change in 2026, 2027 when these legislations are further due for review and updation. So we'll have to keep a close eye because this is an evolving piece of legislation, and we have to keep a close eye in order to see what changes are coming and how we need to prepare for that. CBAM is often not talked in the maritime domain, but we think it is an important piece of the puzzle because the importers, which are in the EU subcontinent, they have importing cement, iron, steel, aluminium, fertilizers, electricity, and hydrogen. They are going to come into the same market to procure carbon credit to offset the amount of carbon that may have been emitted from the place where they are importing it within the jurisdiction. Even though it doesn't directly impact ship owners, but looking at the whole logistics as a one piece, you would think that there will be some synergies when CBAM costs are also kicking in for the importers. So as a shipper, you may want to see if there is something that can be done in terms of optimizing that value chain even further. So that's quite an important piece of the legislation, and not to and also to mention that these importers are not on the market yet. Market meaning the market where UAs are being traded, the EEX, the exchange. So obviously these new entities would also join the market when they have to surrender it from 2026 onwards. So that's another change that you will see, new players entering into the market, competing for the same credits, which is declining year over year under the regime of the ETS. A quick comparison under UETS and FuelEU. So you have under UETS, ship owner pays mostly. You have 1 ton as one EUA, and registered owner is liable, but you can transfer that responsibility around with certain declarations. Now we know it was quite unclear at the beginning of the year, but having gone through multiple, let's say, constructions, we know that registered owner can take responsibility, or even technical managers can take responsibility. All that is needed is a declaration, is a legal declaration to say that I will take the responsibility, and you need to transfer those vessels under the TETIS MRV system. So there is a established process under which you can legally take responsibility of EUTS for any ship, and own that ownership in the TETIS MRV in order to report and surrender those managers for managing the FuelEU compliance. So that's a small change. And obviously on the FuelEU side, you have the cap is limited. The fine is also set to per ton of LSFO equivalent. If you exceed the cap, it is set at 2,400. So that is quite let's say constant calculation that you can do, because the cap is fixed. So what we see now is obviously, which we'll talk more about in the later slides, a FuelEU B2B market is emerging, which is completely driven by brokers like us, but also there are other brokers in the market which are driving those FuelEU surplus and bringing together people who may have deficit if they have no option to change over to biofuels or other alternative means, depending upon the age of the ship, the capacity of the engine, and the trading route that they may be doing. So more on that in further slides. On the compliance side, on the FuelEU side, there are we have gotten many more text and clarity from AMSA. Even a couple of weeks ago, they came out with a webinar further explaining this regime, how they're going to work. Even the TETIS system, we see that new units are being developed. It's not live yet, but we got the glimpse of how that regime will come into play, how the pooling mechanism will become active within the TETIS MRV system. So anybody could initiate the pooling process. So imagine if you are a ship owner having access to TETIS MRV, you have a B2B agreement with other ship owners or technical managers, you could initiate the pooling process for your vessel, subject to the other party accepting it. So you can pull in vessels in a pool and then send out requests. And then once the party accepts, then it can be pulled in, and then the pool verifier can come into play. Borrowing is obviously an option, but it's not a long-term strategy because there is a cap on borrowing. I think it's around 2 years that you can borrow, and also a limit of how much you can borrow from your own future. Obviously, it also put deficit on your futures once you have borrowed from yourself. So pooling seems to be the most promising, let's say, method to comply with creating those surplus. We have seen the market moving towards creating surplus. So if there are vessels that are capable of burning biofuels and alternative fuels, there is a let's say group of brokers that are trying to create as much as surplus as possible. And obviously, many ship owners are more in deficit than what we know is on surplus, obviously because of the cost factors. But that may change as we go into the compliance year in 2025. We of course have our own advisory services, but we do work with a lot of partner brokers within the ecosystem to be able to see how we can better channel those pooling credit surplus that are there in the market. You can of course save it if that helps in terms of your future planning in the banking. And the last method is of course biofuels and e-fuels, depending upon if your vessel actually allows you to burn those fuels. So there is a B2B case here, and if you are a ship owner who has the capacity to create surplus, please bear in mind that there can be more than just meeting your own obligation on that market, which means that if you could generate those surplus, there is a strong market that is evolving. Um, and the market cap obviously is at the 2,400 users mark per ton of LSFO that we earlier saw, because we, of course, that would be traded below that capacity. Otherwise, they're better off paying the fine to the European Union. So that's an update on this slide. So a very quick case study. This is a data taken from publicly available data taken from Thetis on an LR2 tanker. If you see on the left, you will see that she consumed around 1,246 tons of HFO and 1,143 tons of MDO. And if you run the calculation, you will see that she will end up with a fine of 115,000 euros, because the cap is at 89.34 grams CO2 per megajoule, which will be applicable till 2030. And C came out with a score of 91.11 grams CO2. That's the GHG intensity. Now, that surplus of 1.77, once converted into the fine threshold, you will see it comes out to be 115,400 euros. However, if you run the same calculation with the 300 on the bottom part of the slide, if you run it with 381 tons of LNG, that fine significantly decreases to 13,000. And if it is better managed, I'm pretty sure that it could even go into surplus. That the surplus that I was talking about in the previous slide. So another quick comparison. So EU ETS will anyway will become stable once the 100% capacity is reached in terms of the 2026 year. But the FuelEU is going to be the one that is going to be the most expensive in the next years and next decade. Actually, in 2050, it's going to be quite steep. The cost is quite steep, and I think you has said it, made it very clear that without getting off the fossil fuel, it's very difficult to compete in that market. But obviously, it's evolving, and we all need to see how that if that ambitious target is actually met, and what are the pathways we see in terms of the alternative fuel development, the infrastructure development, the port capacity development in terms of providing OPS. So all these are certain questions that everybody has to see and observe, and then update these pieces of legislation. So that's the schedule that will run for both FuelEU and EU ETS. You calculate from 1st January till 31st December, then you submit it to your respective verifiers from for the end of December to March, and then you have the surrendering deadline that is September for each previous year. So this will also apply for FuelEU as well. ETS obviously had the obligation of opening MOHI account. We know many companies have already successfully opened their MOHI account, so now they would be in a position to receive those carbon credits. If you are procuring those carbon credits, you can keep them, and take note that these carbon credits, as the law stands today, doesn't expire. So even if you have bought in excess, I think it's a good investment. You should definitely hold on to it. Either it is for your own compliance, or later on you want to sell it off to somebody else. So it's a good as far as the EUAs are concerned, it's considered as a financial instrument within the EU taxonomy and within the EU financial structures. So basically, it's regulated as such. So you can look at it as a bond or anything else that you hold for holding assets. So that's another side that we see, that is there. It's considered as a financial instrument, and it doesn't expire, so you can hold on to it. Still, we believe that the market is quite good, and it's gonna get on a higher side as we go towards the mid of next year, when the many compliance buyer will be active in the market. So for people who do not understand where this EU is, when it started, how the prices were, this slide can be very useful just to see the market trends and where it is now. Obviously, as you can see, major political factors impact the movement of this carbon trade. So there's a lot goes on when you have to decide, and we need to be sensitive to the price fluctuations. So quarterly trade or daily trade or spot trade or primary trade are all different options depending upon your own internal cash flow, which I'll again touch on the later slides to demonstrate what are the different compliance options, buying options. So this is again the cap is as legislated in EU ETS. The annual cap will be declining every year. It's the agenda to keep on making sure the supply is limited. So you are driving up the cost of the credits as well, and the demand would increase as we just saw that new players will enter the market to buy the same credits, and the supply is being curtailed from the European Union. So that's something to keep in mind. So we see a fair value in 65 to 70 euros. That's where C is right now. The credits are right now. So we see a fair value in that if you have to invest now. So we are one of the we are in a unique position because we are also listed in the exchange ourselves. So we have access to the primary and the secondary market. Although we are not traditional traders like banks or hedge funds, but we are providing custom contracts to ship owners who wanted channels to access the primary and the secondary markets with custom contracts. So we also do consultancy. Even if you have existing channels, feel free to reach out to us and we can advise you more on the possible pathways to procure these credits. So there are, in terms of procuring these credits on a very let's say basic level, what we have is you have primary auctions where the EU auctions these credits on a predetermined schedule, and you as market participant can go and buy on your account or on your customer's account depending upon how you are configured, and then that credit is being allocated to you and it comes into your MOHA account. So that's the relevance of the MOHA account, which was set up for your compliance buying. Like we are traders, so we also can buy, even though we do not have compliance obligation, we can keep it in our account and we can then transfer it to, let's say, our customers who may have a procurement contract with us. On the other hand, there is the secondary market where this trades every day from office hours, and this market is much more volatile or much more, let's say, frequently traded than the primary auctions, which is very much predetermined the quantity and the schedule. But this trades the whole day. So if you have a broker trading in the spot market, then you can either buy the spot, which is basically means you get it on T+1, T+2, which means you buy today, you can get it delivered in the MOA account in 1 or 2 days, depending upon how your contract is structured. And then obviously it has an impact on your cash flow immediately if you are, let's say, emit as you buy option, that is the spot. If you put in forward is an instrument via which you procure today something which may have a delivery date of 1 or 2 years or 3 years. I think on the market right now, futures are available till 2032. So you can even purchase forwards till 2032. So obviously those costs will have to be declared then, and then the delivery will also happen at the time. So there's a very significant difference on buying spot and buying forward. And there is some more detail on this slide, like your internal treasury cost of the money, and please feel free to look at it and see which case suits you most in terms of your own compliance buying. So physical spot, as I was saying earlier, the next best delivery, but it has an impact on your cash flow, immediate impact on your cash flow, while forwards will take time when the delivery date actually comes in. So what we do in this space, what we can do to help you, and obviously we are here. So we are on as a EUA trader, we can help you with the primary and secondary market, but we also have our own data collection system, which we are helping ship owners not only to collect and clean data from ships, but also align it to EU ETS and FuelEU Maritime legislation and make sure that it is constantly calculated and corrected. So that's the strength that we are providing. within that space. We also have voyage routing solutions built in within the solution from the likes of Napa and SPOS. So we are just building on top of these solutions to be able to provide a one-stop solution for voyage optimization, one-stop solution for data correction, and now we are integrated with all verifiers, all IX members, so that allows us to seamlessly transmit data to different verifiers. One of our partner verifier is, of course, with us today. So Dominic, will hear from him how that is advantageous for us to be able to clean data and then send it to verifiers through digital channels. So I think Dominic will touch upon that as well as the benefit of that. That is, and as I said earlier, we are optimizing these voyages with Napa and SPOS in order to make sure that we have the best weather routing possible. But not only that, our solution also has layered in built for different options, so biofuel options or OPS options. If it is available on the ports where you are trading, then you can further, you can really do a very granular voyage planning before you take the voyage, in addition to the traditional weather routing and vessel optimization that we have been using so far. So here it is as a we are a seamless partnership with Veracity. We are one of the perhaps only, if I'm not wrong, whereby we can also send data to Veracity and also get data out of Veracity as solution partners. So we have the OVD data integration to be able to push data to Veracity, and then the solution partner allows us to fetch the data on which we can fetch the data, meaning the verified data, and then we are able to calculate EUAs and provide EUA quotations on that. But Dominic again would touch upon that and other things. This is just a slide to again remind ourselves what is the fuss about ETS and why is it different from what we have been doing in the traditional sense of the word when it comes to vessel reporting. So there are a lot of exceptions that have been put in, and these are all legal exceptions, not really mean much more than what it is written down on the piece of paper, basically. So you have stopping for refueling, you're obtaining supplies, and you're relieving crew. These stops would not count. So somebody needs to actively think about these points. And of course, this is not a completely exhaustive list. So there are certain cases where you have to constantly keep applying, correcting this data set in order to make sure that you are not overpaying, or if you're not under calculating your UA obligation. And the way trade moves, obviously the traditional approach of sending the end of year data to verifiers, that work scope doesn't meet the, is not fit for purpose anymore, because obviously if your commercial side needs the data to be sent as soon as the voyages end, you want the data to be accurate as soon as it is finished. So we are there to help in terms of correcting those data on a daily basis, making sure that you have correct reports as the voyage ends, and every day for that matter, unless we are engaging with the ship to for certain points that we often have to talk to the master in order to get them, obviously, to update those values when we see something has been misreported. So that's our solution. We are using, of course, in addition to the traditional technical experts, we are using these large language models as well. So we are, of course, using these models to see what else we can do in order to enhance the analytical capacity and learning capabilities of the software, but still human is in the loop. And we're proud to say that our main KPI is still that humans are there in order to control these automated processes, heavily automated processes, so that we have the best accountability in place. And the FuelEU side, you obviously this again kicks in first of January 2025. So I hope all of you have been able to submit your monitoring plans by now, and ready to implement those values. For us, it's the same data set. So owners that are with us, they do not need to do anything new. We simply have started calculating the FuelEU GHG intensity for the voyages that we are anyway collecting. That means that you do not need to do anything new from your end. We will be able to continue on the same data set. So that's the kind of the cap what we are trying to show here, and how the different values will again be. So in the next year, or in the next couple of weeks, you will be able to see the FuelEU dashboard coming live for all the subscribers of CyberSmart, and then you will be able to follow it throughout the year and download customized reports as we go along the FuelEU slide. So I think that's one of my last slides, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So basically, just to sum up, what we are doing here is we are bringing accuracy in data collection and processing, and doing it in a very meticulous way. And we have brought in industry-leading voyage optimization solution built on Napa from Finland, which are our partner SPOS, which is now being controlled by ABB. So we have that inbuilt, so you can use the same interface to customize for multiple things, whether FuelEU and ETS. And we provide you plug and play system, so you don't need to download anything. It's a browser based tool, so if you have internet, you have everything on the go, anywhere, any device. So it's not limited to any download or custom installs. So we, as a trader, we also have the last piece of the puzzle, if I may, that we can show you market insights as well. So we are not just doing the technical bit or the commercial bit. We have the complete visibility from technical to engaging with classification societies to engaging with the market players when it comes to UAs and FuelEU credits now. So we can help you. Obviously, if you haven't registered your MOHA accounts yet, we will obviously help you with that. If you still need help with monitoring plans or updating those monitoring plans, we can help you with that. And last but not least, we will be able to also advise you of any alternative technologies that you may use in terms of your simulation planning. So we'll have tools that can help you simulate different voyages, different exposure to you, different exposure to fuel structures, so that you can make those retrofitting or conversion decisions with a very reliable calculation that you can have within the portal that we provide. So that will be all from my end, and I will hand over the control back to my team. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, sir, for the insightful thoughts. It's a quick reminder for the audience. Please raise your questions, if anything you have, on the Q&A session on the taskbar on the bottom of your screen, or you can raise it on the chat board as well. So, okay, let's move to another quick poll. We will keep the voting open for 10 to 15 seconds. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Now let's hear from our next speaker, Mr. Dominic NJ, Head of EPAC at DNV, brings over 2 decades of expertise in advancing digital transformation and decarbonization in the maritime industry through the Veracity Cloud platform. Mr. Dominic, over to you.
Thank you, Deepti. Maybe again, just as a signal, am I being heard audio-wise? Fantastic. Good. Thanks also to Sanjit for laying such a good grounds for the next session. It makes my work a little bit easier when it comes to explaining, because you have taken the tough part to explain the regulatory requirements. One second, let me just get my slides control. Okay, good. All right, maybe just before I dive into the content, let me say a few words about Veracity. More is known with DNV as a classification society. Lesser known that we have our own independent cloud platform developed 7 years ago. The platform is called Veracity, and it's very simple logic here, because DNV represents now 160 years to deliver trust and assurance on safe ship operations. And we are moving with the same trust to industry digitalization. We are faced with big data. We are faced with a lot of data that we are working with. And I guess that layer of assurance and trust is needed as more and more applications, as more and more of our work are driven towards the digital space. Veracity is a growing cloud. You can have a look at the marketplace at your free time. There are about 300 service applications in operations today. The other numbers just show that the kind of a transactional volume that is going across this cloud. But for a very specific reason, today we just focus on Emissions Connect because Emissions Connect is there to solve a very huge industry relevant case, right? Which is on compliance and reporting. So just to structure our discussion a little bit, I'll just move on to talk about the ETS FuelEU without overlapping on the earlier presenters' parts. I'll focus more on the second part and the third. Why is it getting so much attention and how to deal with it? And when we talk about how to deal with it, I've also put up some use cases where we could look at it from under the lenses of different stakeholders, right? Be it a charger, an owner, or a manager. So we all know from the regulation that there is now a price to pay for a GHG emission intensity. Yeah, EU MRV is the basis of the ETS. ETS looks at carbon pricing, which is calculating the tank to wake. There is reports out there that shows that collectively the exposure for ETS would amount to 20 billion, yeah, industry-wide. Yeah. And if we look at FuelEU, it looks into fuel levy. Yeah, it calculates the well to wake. Yeah, it's not anymore how much you burn, but what are you actually burning? Yeah. And again, in our own research report, we had done a maritime forecast to 2050. We took an example vessel. Earlier on, you saw the various kind of options to comply for FuelEU. If we look at this vessel that chooses to pay penalty, yeah, as a perhaps a short-term solution, we all know that that is also not sustainable moving forward because it's not only a compounded figure, the second year becomes more expensive, but we are looking at roughly 9 million per vessel, right? If you again choose to pay penalty as a strategy. So in short, there's a price to pay for carbon emissions. Again, the market is always talking about ETS and FuelEU naturally because it involves money. Yeah? But not forgetting that CRI is also an important element despite certain flaws that we have heard about the way that it's being calculated. But bear in mind that CRI is here to stay. We have heard it in MEPC 82, and we will see the same being addressed in MEPC 83. So CRI will be there for the long term, yeah, in running. So again, it looks at ranking, but if we deal with the same issues, if we solve the same fundamental industry challenges, we are also taking care for the subsequent regulations to come. Yeah? So we saw both ETS and FuelEU. So in terms of the FuelEU Maritime, the way to kind of administer is very simple. Yeah? There is a trajectory target. If the companies are not meeting that trajectory target, you pay a penalty. However, the way to calculate the penalty, the construction of compliant balance, what is deficit, what is pooling, what is surplus, that is super complex. Yeah? As compared to EU ETS, where theoretically it's quite easy to calculate and compute because it's represented by this simple formula in front of you. There's a cost multiplied by your sum of emission by the phase-in period 40, 70, and subsequently 100. However, you saw from Sanjeev that the administration part of the ETS is very complicated. Yeah? There is a trading account, there is a MOHA account, there are different responsibilities that you have to delegate. Are you keeping as an owner or are you delegating this to the ISM company? So the whole administration becomes really complex. Again, I'm not going to repeat what the other presenter has said, but just look at the current pricing. I took these numbers only yesterday evening, so it's about 66.3 as we speak, but that will go up and down, right? The highest being 100 sometime last year. But of course, we all understand that this ETS is being traded with a reduction. So there will be a reduction in the supply that is allowed for the shipping kind of a trading. Yeah, so we can only expect that the price of the EUA will go up moving forward. So when we see these regulations coming in, why is it that there are complexities coming up? Right? Do understand, MRV is not a new regulation. It has been around for 6-7 years. Yeah? What is now complicated is because the industry or EU is trying to wrap around some commercial over this statutory instrument. Yeah, it used to be a annual verification and annual submission, but now we need to calculate a per voyage basis because there is a cost involved. Somebody is paying for this cost, be it the owner, the charterer, or the cargo owners, right? Which means that there will be adjustments. So we can never find answers in very binary terms, right? It doesn't mean that it's like that or it's like that. In most cases, there are a lot of commercial agreements have to be rewritten. Charter party agreements have to be kind of redrafted. Ship manager contract between ISM company and owners have to be kind of also redrafted in a way. We are operating in a very fragmented industry. That is why when we talk about collecting some data to do calculations on it, it becomes complex because there's no uniformity, right? There's a lot of different ways that this data is being collected. There's just simply a lack of standardization. And then if you try to do calculations and you want to buy EUAs and you want to make this transaction, all of these are, again, very complicated. Again, oversimplifying is not just these 4 boxes which are challenged. I'm sure you as a shipping company out there, you will probably see more, right? More complexities. Sorry for that glitch. Okay. Just a bit of a recap, just to show, in the past, we have this annual audit, as Sanjay mentioned. We get a total emission exposure for the year, yeah, total distance, total consumption, total number of voyages. We are verifying ourselves in DND, so we do a traditional annual audit of the data for the annual verification service. That is all that is required, right, from that perspective. But because of what I just mentioned, this transfer of liabilities, because of this polluter pay principle, we now require accurate emissions accounting. Right? So the shifting doesn't matter. The ship manager is mandated or not mandated, but when there is a shift of this liability, meaning some party will invoice the other party for the exposure and they claim the money back, and this moves from the manager to the owner to the charterer. So in this process of invoice and compensation, you will require evidence, right? Or anyone in this value chain will require evidence to pay only for the exposure that they are kind of looking at. We are not, the charterer is not going to pay more for what his exposure would be for a particular port kind of a voyage leg. So with that, maybe we just quickly go in a few use cases, which I thought it's probably also interesting to share, right? Starting with the first one, where we have worked with this a manager and an owner, and in this case, the owner has mandated the manager to do reporting, collection of data, and also eventually submitting the compliance on behalf of the owner. And in this case, we can see that data sharing is key here, because there is obviously money that is involved in this kind of exchange when we are delegating the responsibility. Yeah. So what it actually means, and also also highlighted by Sanjeev earlier on in this presentation, that we need to have some seamless data sharing possibility, right? We do not want to, again, reinvent the wheel. We want to reuse the value of the data. Ideally, it should move from the data collection, a single touch point. It goes into a party who could give a third-party audited view on that emissions data, such as the service that we provide here in Emissions Connect. And with that output, it should flow. It should flow to the next party who is helping the entity to do perhaps EUA settlement. It could be going to the banks, or the same data could be fed for other use cases. For instance, sea cargo charter reporting, or in this case, maybe even to Intertanko, which we are also supporting in terms of data readiness. So this end-to-end value chain is really what is needed to make the complexity more manageable. So this is just one example. When you receive the data from us, our partners will receive your verified data, where they could move this information into a kind of a trading platform, where they could look at EUA adequacy or inadequacies for that matter. Use case number 2, we are working with a charter. In this case, a pure charter. They're not. They have got time charter, voice charter, spot charter, etc. And in their world, because they will get a bill from the owners for the ETS, right? So what happens is that before they get a request of what EUA is required from the charter by the owners, they decided, in this case, you saw the name there, so we work with ClearLake, and they are using this information as a kind of an end of voyage declaration. So end of voyage, they will send this statement to the owners, who will say that this is the amount that we will pay for a particular voyage, right? And they do it on a monthly basis. But in that process, this feedback loop to manage data quality is important, because it is no longer at the after 6 months or at the end of the reporting year. They need to do this closure at the end of voyage. So a continuous monitoring and a feedback loop to manage a data quality issue is critical to ensure that the data is clean, in order for our customer to print ETS statements, and that ETS statements will be then used for all kinds of kind of a settlement. And this process, again, is completely user controlled. That means it's all self-service, right? It's on-demand service. As long as the data quality criteria is met, the screen that you see here is the same screen that the end user can literally press the button, the green button on the bottom right, to generate a statement. So all of this is on demand, it's self-service. Once we get clean, good, clean working data. And what you get enhanced is a statement like this, but the enabler, again, like I said, is to ensure that there's continuous data flow in order to manage this process. There's another use case where we saw quite interesting that in the case of commercial contracts, they're looking at kind of putting this as a prefixture discussion into the early contract. The terms are included in the commercial contract, and what the customer has done was to use a simulation, the simulation module, to simulate the amount of EUAs and costs based on the variables. And in this case, the input are the operational variables. If I run the vessel from port A to port B, Singapore to Rotterdam, a vessel is running at 15 knots under these weather conditions, whatever, what will be potential exposure? So the whole idea behind this was for them to take an early discussion and not having to claim or to defend a claim, right? So they could have more proactive kind of a discussion in commercial preparing. So the setup is really easy, because we, again, are not advocating that we want to put another system on board the vessel. We are already working in a very fragmented industry. We want to tap on the customers that we are working with the systems that they are using, they are in place, right? And through this, the partner network is very powerful, because it allows us to have an outreach to vessels which are also not D&D class, right? And it doesn't have to be D&D class, because in this case, we are working with data partners such as Varuna, who are able to feed us daily data through an API exchange, right? As probably better illustrated over here. In the case of ETS, we are only interested for the noon report data, because those are the elements which are needed to kind of check for validations, etc. So ideally, there would be a single touch point where the vessel has made the noon report. That report is going back to the shoreside server, yeah, to the Varuna cloud, for instance, and from there there's an API to Veracity, where we will put additional checks, validation, and our own algorithms in there to look for that data quality which is needed at high frequency. And so not at high frequency, at a higher reporting frequency, I would say, that we could see that every day there is a validation check that is being done in order to fulfill a kind of a voice level kind of a possibility for verification at the end to generate that statement that you saw earlier on. And to make this work is a simple way that we do it. We call it the OVD, in short, operational vessel data, which is the language that we use to talk to the different data providers that we work with. Yeah? So with this OVD as a standard for reporting log abstract and also other operational data, essentially we are creating a common language, which means setting up with an existing partner on new vessels to report. It is literally at the flick of a button. To onboard a new data provider who is not yet our partner is also easy, because there is always a common language that we are talking to new data providers to give us the data that we need. Today, we are looking at noon reported data, but the OVD standard is already capable to support sensor high frequency data if needed, right? Eventually to complement with manual reported data. So again, the end-to-end data sharing is better visualized over here. So there is input on the left-hand side. So I simply call it, there is a data contributor. So in this case, the data provider feeds the noon report data or any operational data from the vessel to us, which is the left block there. We do that part in the middle, which is doing the continuous data verification, churning out the verified statement. And the verified data could also be API'd out to the right-hand side, which I call them the consumer of this data. And today, the consumers could be, for instance, in Varuna, who is taking on the role as a kind of a EUA aggregator. Yeah? They could also be shared with traders. It could be shared with banks, etc. Right? Who have been appointed to kind of act on behalf of the customer in terms of the EUA settlement. Right. First of all, I'm not going to dive into all this formula, right? I wanted to make this slide as busy as possible, because it is that complex, right? Because there is when we talk about FuelEU, sorry, maybe I jumped too fast. I stopped at the ETS, but now I'm moving a little bit onto the FuelEU chapter. So when we talk about the FuelEU, again, we are looking at a different set of challenges. There are, again, formulas to calculate what is well-to-wake emissions, what is the penalty, what is compliance balance, if you are going into ice navigation or not, the allocation of the biofuel component, and the reporting of this biofuel. So there's so many considerations, right, which make the whole calculation even more complex. I will not dive into all of those, but just highlight on three in particular, which already give us a lot of thoughts, right? First being the energy in scope. If we understand that when FuelEU comes in, there is first of all, there is a kind of a geographical scope for the application, meaning vessels going into Europe, there's 50% of energy. Trading within, it will be 100%, which is counting, and out is 50%. Difference here again is looking at energy. We are not looking at CO2 only. So it's a complete GHG. So when we apply this regulation into a kind of a wash distribution, we could see that, well, if you have a wash going Again, same example, Singapore going to Rotterdam, then there will be an energy scope that will be allocated for this voyage leg, right? And if you're using the traditional LFO in this case, what can you assign? And also if you are having a biodiesel component, you need to distribute and allocate this in a smart way, that you maximize the full allocation for a voyage that is perhaps 100% counting, right? If you're using the more expensive fuel as an alternative. Second consideration, second complexity is this compliance pool. It's very hard to kind of say this out in one breath, but if you look at the compliance pool, there's a few considerations. First of all, it's possible to pool not only from the internal fleet, but you can pool externally. I try to kind of make this simple to understand with this visual. In short, the objective of this compliance pool is to make the 5 vessels, just for illustration, into the blue bucket that you see on the right hand side, right? So there could be some vessels like 1 and 3 in this case who are red, but the whole idea after pooling is that you want to move them into the blue bucket, that all are compliant and you don't have to pay a penalty cost. So that's a simple understanding. There are some restrictions or regulations, right, that define what you can do. For example, those in red cannot go into a bigger red if you pool, and those who are in the blue zone after pooling, it cannot go into a deficit zone. Yeah. So, but those are details. In short, this is an art. Yeah. It's a strategy even. Yeah. What you want to pool and how you're going to pool your vessel to arrive in this blue bucket. That's also one challenge. And for me, I think the third point here, which is really the biggest kind of a gap when FuelEU comes in force. It is about this alignment between regulatory and the commercial dimensions, right? When for FuelEU, the responsible party is the ISM company, which is the technical manager. The right-hand side, where you have a ship owner having a charter party agreement with the charterer, they have a relationship. However, today the market is constructed in a way that the technical managers do not have a relationship to the charterer. They have a relationship to the owner, right? Because the owner and the ship manager has got a shipman contract. Well, that states how you manage my vessel, but they do not have an agreement to the charterer. But if we put this FuelEU in place, we are trying to kind of put all of them together and trying to align the line to get a single line of sight. But today there is no single line of sight because this is not there's no alignment in this case, right? Because the responsible party and the charterer is just kind of a missing. The relationship is missing. Again, this slide here is simplifying the relationship. We know that even with the ship owner kind of a setup, it can be complicated. If you have 50 vessels, it's very common to have 50 different entities. One ship as one account, and behind the ship owner entity setup, there could be different commercial arrangements, right? Which is time chartered, spot chartered, voyage chartered, whatever. So again, that complication with the agreement between owner and charterer, and if you try to bring this to the ISM company who needs to have a compliance kind of a compliance obligation towards the authority, that's where problem starts to come up because there are no process in place. So what we're saying here is that, well, as FuelEU regulation is still evolving, there'll still be some changes, but at least what we see relevant is that the verified data in FuelEU again becomes super important because you need to have the possibility to document this compliance, not at the end of the reporting period. You need to document this at the for a specific charter period, for instance, right? This reallocation mechanism, right? That means whoever that is having this benefit of the compliance balance as a surplus, it needs to be also verified, right? That amount. Compliance balance, we all know that is an asset because a surplus is an asset, but there's no currency value today in in having compliant balance, right? So all the more it becomes more critical to have a third-party verified statement towards these contractual terms that you might make between owner and charterer and the ISM company and the owner. So ideally, again, this an on-demand service, right? The end user could kind of generate self-service their own FuelEU statement to allow for data sharing, right? High quality data sharing among these stakeholders. We see that this would be fundamentally the key thing that these stakeholders must have to kind of give themselves some insurance, right? In working towards certain parts of the regulations which are still being formed. We thought that maybe a solution for a commercial management in FuelEU could look like this, but again, this is too complex for me to dive into each flow link, but just appreciate this at the level that there is one entity there which is involved with compliance, right? And their lenses would be to ensure the correct payment or penalty is done to the authority, right? And then there's another entity which is the owner there's a need to provide financial guarantees and this compensation on compliance costs. And on the charter side, perhaps they are interested more on the settlement, right, of this cost, which is maybe going at the end of the charter period. So again, the common line here across is that it is very, very critical to be able to share verified data, emissions data across these various stakeholders, right? Because this whole arrangement will become very complex if not properly managed. Right, in closing, again, depending on which part of the value chain that you are sitting and what lenses that you are looking through, as a ship owner, there are different things that might be important in order to kind of prioritize the next steps as a ship manager, as a charterer as well. So that it all differs a little bit when it comes to roles and responsibility. In closing, again, if I were to kind of make a wish list for the takeaway for today's session, I really encourage the participants who are also involved in this process of the ETS and FuelEU, ensure that, first of all, there is available data, right? Because you cannot control what you don't manage, right? And you don't manage if you do not have available data. So work on that line. Once the data is there, you need to be at the level where you could trust your data, whether you are using this for compliance or you're using these data for fleet vessel improvement initiatives, right? Even for the fact that you might be deciding to invest in this technology or that technology, it all comes down to having verified data, right, on your consumption in order to kind of look at the next step. Lastly, managing your data, because today we are not talking about me, myself, and I in my world that I'm working with my data. Suddenly, the same data is relevant for the other stakeholders, right? Banks are interested in this data for green finance. Insurance are interested in this data. Your sustainability team is interested for this kind of data. The ESG reporting is also requiring the same kind of a foundation, right, with the emissions and GHG verified data. So think about it. The need for data sharing across stakeholders becomes even more pertinent as we move along when there are new regulations coming in. With that, I thank you very much, and may I pass back to the host as well as the moderator.
Thank you, sir, for the practical and thought-provoking session. Let's pose for another poll question before we move to our Q&A session. What I would like to do at this point, I need our panelists to do a scroll through our varied question that the audience have generated. Please choose the questions that you would like to tackle. Audience, you have next 10 to 15 seconds to respond to the poll. Great response, everyone. Now let's move to our Q&A session. Let's begin with Mr. Sanjeev. So you can come up with your set of question and answers.
Thank you, Deepti. I've been trying to answer some of it in writing, but please do let us know if there is a follow-up needed. From the unanswered question, I see there's a question: does fuel prioritization impact the cost of operation, particularly for voyages requiring a mix of low GHG and fossil fuel? So if I understand the question correctly, so the fuel mix, how the fuel mix would impact the cost of operations. That would be, if you have EU port exposure, this would be a key question on almost all voyages that you would be planning from 1st January 2025 onwards. So where would you bunker? How much would you bunker? What mix you want to burn at what leg? Because even if you look deeper into FuelEU regime, you will see that only 50% of the voyage of the biofuels would account once you are coming from a non-EU port to a new port. So there will be quite some considerations to make. Now, this having said that, obviously, I'm assuming that your vessel is able to burn biofuels, right? So if your vessel is not able to burn biofuels, then you need to then have a different strategy of compliance. So out of the 4 compliance mechanisms that we discussed today, from borrowing to pooling to alternative fuels and banking, you obviously then have to go and see whether borrowing is something that can help you in the short term. And then pooling is obviously is something that you need to start working around, because the market is already evolving around pooling. Different players are already in discussions. So if you have surplus or if you have deficit, you would be in a better shape to already understand how you approach the broking channels that you trust, and then see what you get in terms of how much you can secure and whether you could have a contract in place in order to secure those surplus, or when and if and when it comes into the market. So that is something that you would like to already pre-plan. And obviously we will also be able to help you in terms of making those planning. BIMCO came out with a clause as well, so you may want to look deeper into the BIMCO clause, but obviously BIMCO has kept it very fairly standard in terms of defining what are the different roles one could take, talking about charterers, ship owners, and technical managers. So that is a good I think starting point to see how BIMCO has worded it, and see what suits you as a business. And it will largely depend upon the ships, the type of ships you operate, the amount of port calls, EU port calls you have, and then maybe that could give the best compliance mechanism for you. So over to you, Deepti.
Thank you for those insights, sir. Moving forward, Mr. Dominic, so you can come with your set of questions and answers.
Yeah, maybe I'll pick up the question from Govind Misra. How do companies balance compliance costs with operational efficiency? This is a complex one, right? Because again, we are looking at short-term, mid-term, or long-term kind of a compliance. If we look at ETS first, not even with the FuelEU. So ETS, we know that there will be possible if you reduce consumption, right? If you reduce consumption, you will reduce CO2 naturally. But how do we reduce consumption? Now, that comes with all these performance improvement devices, kind of initiatives. You could do better hull paint coatings and or installing some kind or retrofit or modification of the hull even. So, but all these are costs, and these have to be balanced with the way that or the way that the vessel is being traded, the age of the vessel, yeah? Do you pay more, or maybe there is no chance to even embark on some of the performance improvement because the space in that or the technical specs of the vessel does not allow for this to be done, right? So it is a very difficult question to say, well, do I pay or do I go with efficiency? But what we see definitely for sure is that the next 2 years, the industry will be very much obsessed with reporting compliance, right? That means to get the data right, to make sure that I report the correct data. I have the possibility to share data, like I mentioned in the presentation. And sometime from 26 onwards, the industry will be naturally guided into solving. Now, they will then look at after 2 years, all the reporting is done and dusted. Now, where do I improve? Well, what should I do? How to bring this down? This penalty cost is going up. Now, do I put in wind-assisted sails on vessels which I want to kind of order from the yard in future? Or are there certain things that we do? So we will see that there will be first of all, there will be a timeline where we will see more companies going into operational efficiency. Then the question about making the correct candidates, selecting the correct technology, that will be coming in place. But you need to, again, take a long-term view to see what is possible on your operated fleet. And if you're going for new buildings, then what will help you in on the longer track to give you the full mile? Yeah. Back to moderator.
Thank you to our panelists for thoughtfully addressing these audience questions. And thank you our audience for submitting such engaging queries. We apologize if we couldn't answer all your questions during the session. Rest assured, we will include additional insights in the material we are providing after the webinar. Before we move to the key takeaway session, let's engage with one last time with a final poll. In the meantime, panelists, please prepare yourself for the key takeaway session. Audience, you will have 10 to 15 seconds to submit your response. Thank you for your input. Now let's hear from our panelists as they share their key takeaways. Mr. Sanjeev, let's start with you. What are your main takeaways from today's session?
Thank you, Deepthi. So the main takeaways would be, if you are all this year we have been hearing the renewed efficiency on data collection and data cleaning. The traditional softwares the traditional methods, I should say, that are there are obviously prone to errors, which we know. Sometimes it is human error, sometimes it is some other factors at play. And we are, of course, also very hopeful to see how this high frequency data could transform this landscape and how much of that error margin can be controlled. So our let's say emphasis would be on improving the methods of data collection. So we are also trialing some new sensors, retrofitting existing ships, as well as working with the new builds that are coming out, which may already have an HFT methods installed. So we are quite compatible with that. So data is definitely the key in driving this compliance mechanism to the best possible. And once you have the correct data, the clean data, then obviously that forms the building block of any compliance strategy that you may be coming up with from your business consideration point. So So that's very important to emphasize. And I think from what we hear from our partners like Veracity, how much they have invested and facilitated this standardization across the industry, like OBD guidelines. That really formed the whole basis on which we have modeled, and that would be the key to make sure that your data is collection methodologies are streamlined if you have it, and then the compliance would definitely be the best in terms of efficient planning. So that is what I would like to emphasize. And these regulations are evolving. These regulations are constantly moving. But anything that is built on a bedrock of data that is accurate would definitely be the best scenario for your business. So that is what I would like to take away from this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for those thoughtful insight. Let's now hear from Mr. Dominic. So over to you.
Thank you. I think my takeaway here and my appeal, my recommendation, my encouragement to the listeners would be really to not harness the technology, make use of technology to do the job, right? Don't look at every project today because I've got an ETS requirement. I take this as one project, and then I have another request for an automating. I look at it for as another project. Look at it slightly long term on the regulatory, on the compliance, what I need. We touch on the Moon report because today is needed to fulfill those requirements. But take a little bit further outlook in this and say, okay, because once my reporting is done, is what I need to improve. How do I need to improve? And that's when maybe the high frequency data comes in. You might be needed to start a high frequency project, but again, start to think, frame together what you need. So in terms of high frequency is again not about collecting 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 data points. It is about what problems you want to solve, right? The decision support that you want to enable, and then going backwards to then look at, okay, now what data do I need? And once you have the data, can I trust the data? That is again the element. So it goes back to the same cycle. So, but take a longer perspective. We are always very short-sighted sometimes when we just look at this project and then we end up having 8, 10 different projects that we started and they're not in sync because this platform is different. We cannot share this. The dashboard cannot be looking at this data. We don't want to get ourselves into that corner. So take a slightly longer perspective, look beyond just the regulatory, look at internally what are the requirements, what are your challenges, what is your wish list, yeah? And then work from there and then decide the data that you need, and that should be the kind of a starting point. Yeah, then over back to you, to the moderators.
Thank you both for summarizing today's session so well. As we wrap up, I would like to thank our incredible panelists, Mr. Sanjeev and Mr. Dominic, for their expertise and for sharing such valuable insight with us today. Special thanks to my co-host, Tomaljit, for seamlessly guiding us through the webinar. And finally, a big thank you to all of you, our audience, for your active engagement. Your question and poll response enriched today's discussion. We will send out the webinar recording and additional materials shortly. So please keep an eye on your inbox. If you have any additional questions or queries, please contact us at marketing@varunamarine.eu. On behalf of the entire team, thank you once again for joining us. We're looking forward to see you at our next webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you.